Have you ever wondered why mountains grow so tall? And more importantly, is there a limit to how tall they can grow? Well, in this episode, we're going to talk about this, so sit down and relax because it's going to be an interesting one. My name is MrEarthGuy, and you're listening to Earth SciShow. Mountains are fascinating. They exist on nearly every continent and are the result of tectonic forces colliding, pushing crust together, and creating large mountain ranges. This process, where they fold, buckle, and uplift, is known as orogenesis. Usually mountains are created at converging plate zones, so this is where two plates meet together, they crumple, and they push rock upwards. This is why we have mountains like the Himalayas, where we have the largest mountain on Earth above sea level, which is Mount Everest, standing at over 8.8 kilometers tall. But mountains are also created when we have lava flows through volcanics. An example of this are shield volcanoes. These are large, wide volcanoes which can go really tall. One example is Mount Fuji, or we also have Mauna Kea in the Hawaiian island chain. Not many people realize that Mauna Kea, which is below sea level, is technically the tallest mountain on Earth. It scales nearly 12 kilometers tall, and that is a mind-bogglingly high number. So we do know that mountains can grow really tall, either above or below sea level, but is there a maximum limit that we can reach on Earth's crust? Well, the theoretical limit is around 15,000 meters. Now, to put that into perspective, that was nearly twice the size of Mount Everest. But there are many factors that determine how high a mountain can grow, and let's talk about these in further detail. How tall a mountain grows depends on three main factors. We have uplift, so these are the forces that are responsible for the folding and buckling of crust. We have natural elemental forces such as rain, wind, ice, etc., which erode and weather down rocks as they get taller. And then we have crustal isostasy. This is how much flexibility our crust has. You can almost imagine putting a mountain in an area where there's thin crust, and naturally the crust will start to bend and deform underneath it due to its weight. And it's these three things that will determine how large a mountain becomes. For example, on Mars, which has a relatively thick crust due to its cooling over time, it has Olympus Mons, which is technically the largest mountain in our solar system, rising at nearly 26 kilometers tall. If we were to pick up Olympus Mons and put it on Earth's crust, it will sink through down into the mantle. That's how heavy it is. Scientists have done many studies over the years to try and determine what the exact number is, and as I mentioned before, the consensus is around 15 kilometers tall. This takes into account the erosional rates, the uplift capacity, and the crustal isostasy. So where would a volcano or mountain of this size fall on Earth's crust? Well, for those that are unaware, there are two types of crust on Earth. We have the oceanic plate and we have the continental. The oceanic plate is denser and thinner, normally ranging between 5 to 7 kilometers. The continental crust, on the other hand, can range between 25 to 75 kilometers, therefore making it a lot thicker. Now, if we come back to crustal isostasy, the thicker the crust, the more weight it can hold. Therefore, the likely candidate would be the continental crust, mostly due to stability. But the world is a dynamic place, and we can never say for sure what the climate will do. Erosional rates vary across the world. Usually as the mountain gets higher, it's exposed to more natural elements. So things like glaciation, freeze-thaw weathering, which is where water turns to ice, and in that process it expands by 8%, therefore making fractures in rocks, and wind erosion. But there is also one other factor that we haven't yet discussed, and that is the root of mountains. Yes, you heard that right. Mountains have roots. Much like plants and trees have roots which help them stabilize in the surface, the roots of mountains sort of act as a counterbalance to the weight above. Now, the mountains don't physically grow roots because they're not sentient or alive, but it's a natural balancing act of the crust with its isostasy. So if a mountain is 8 kilometers tall, the root of the mountain will be as deep, and this has big implications for the erosional and uplift rates of mountains. Because if you picture this, Mount Everest starts growing, and it has a root of equal depth. As more of the top is eroded, the crustal buoyancy will push the root higher, thereby keeping the range of the mountain high. It's only once the root is completely eliminated that the mountain itself can actually get to a flat level. So It's a really complicated question when we ask, how tall theoretically could a mountain grow? It relies on erosional rates, uplift rates, weathering rates, and the amount of uplift from the root of the mountain. The story of orogenesis is a fascinating one. Scientists and geologists across the world are always studying them as they give us clues to Earth's hidden past, and they also allow us to see how things have changed over time. This is the process or the study of geomorphology, where we look at landscapes and try and determine what's happened to them and what may happen to them. The story of plate tectonics is a balance of upward and downward forces, battling it out until the very end like a game of tug of war. Ultimately, there is no winner, because eventually it will become flat. But this takes millions, if not billions of years to occur due to those dynamic processes which we've described in this episode. And on that note, I'm going to leave it here and come back to you in a second episode where we're going to talk about how mountains are actually created in more detail. If you enjoyed this format of episode where it's more conversational, I implore you and urge you to subscribe and follow and share this with your friends. I've been your host, MrEarthGuy, and if you don't follow me on TikTok, I urge you to do so as well. I always post content 3 or 4 times a week. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Earth Sci Show. And remember, stay curious.